If you're in the market for a new mid-size three-row family SUV that's a nice alternative to more well-known rivals like the Toyota Highlander, Honda Pilot, and Ford Explorer, the original Mazda CX-9 had always been an easy choice. Based originally off of heavily modified version of the Ford Edge, it even shared the Ford-sourced Duratec V6 underneath the hood. Now, over the years, the CX-9 kind of grew in popularity, but shockingly, Mazda actually replaced it with an all-new flagship called the CX-90 back in late 2023. It had an all-new rear-drive architecture, a brand-new turbocharged electrified inline-six under the hood, and it had an even more premium interior that would make you think twice before buying a luxury brand. So as you can see, this week we are testing out the latest 2026 CX-90 in this new premium sport trim level. And the big question I want to answer: has Mazda made enough changes to their flagship three-row family SUV to keep consumers interested? Stay tuned to find out. Now, before we start talking about the updated styling that Mazda gave this unique trim level for 2026, let me first start off by popping the hood and reminding you guys what's powering this vehicle. Now, when this car was first introduced, it kind of had specs that were more akin to a BMW versus a Mazda, but what you're looking at here is the upgraded engine, a 3.3-liter turbocharged direct injection inline-six engine. Now, as you can see underneath this big plastic cover, which tries to make it look like an inline-six with these little notches here, you can actually raise this cover up by twisting these two little tabs and then utilizing this kind of like plastic tab over here to actually hold this little plastic cover up. But as you can see, you're going to find a longitudinally mounted engine. The only other vehicle in the class that uses a rear drive biased architecture is the new Ford Explorer. But this engine is essentially available in two states of tune. This is the S version, which is the up-level engine, meaning that 3.3-liter eSkyactiv G turbocharged inline-six delivers up to 340 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque. If you feed it premium gas, it gives you that power. If you feed it regular gas, the horsepower drops to 319. That's still a healthy increase versus the standard 280 horsepower that you get from the non-S versions of this powertrain. There's also a plug-in hybrid available. It combines a four-cylinder with a powerful electric motor. That makes around 323 horsepower. We'll save that for a different review. Mazda's eSkyactiv all-wheel drive system is basically standard. There is no rear drive version of this car, but it is a rear drive biased all-wheel drive system, and all that power goes out through an 8-speed automatic transmission. Now, I mentioned earlier it's an electrified mild hybrid, which means it has a 0.33 kilowatt-hour battery pack and their M hybrid boost. That electric motor basically functions, replaces the starter generator. It delivers an extra 16 horsepower and around 118 pound-feet on its own. Although technically you can't combine the outputs to, create that 340. The 340 is basically on the inline-six by itself. Now, fuel economy is rated at a pretty impressive 23 in the city, 28 on the highway. That is, of course, on premium if you want the full 340 horsepower, around 25 combined, but it's just under 20-gallon fuel tank. You're looking at around, theoretically, 490 miles of range on a full tank. Now, Mazda doesn't quote a 0 to 60 time. The last model we tested did it in 6.2 seconds with a top speed of around 130 miles an hour. This vehicle weighs, or can tow up to 5,000 pounds, but it also weighs in at around 4,900 pounds. So it's heavy, but it's also not the heaviest vehicle you're going to find in the segment. But let's go ahead and put this tab away here, which may be a little difficult to do with one hand. But yes, once you close that up, you can go ahead and close the hood. But let's go ahead and talk about the exterior styling of this vehicle. So as you can see, when this car first came out back in 2023, it very much looked like an evolution of the old CX-9. You can kind of think of this vehicle as a third-generation CX-9, even though it has an all-new platform, all-new architecture, all-new name. It's basically an all-new vehicle. But this particular one that I'm showing you is a new trim for 2026 called the Premium Sport. Mazda has simplified the trims for this model, going from a total of 8 down to 6. Although technically they removed 3, but then they added this new Premium Sport trim level. The S model that I'm showing you here, the Turbo S, is only available in Premium Sport and Premium Plus. You can see the headlights are Mazda's adaptive full LED headlights, which are pretty slim in its design, but they also have this nice little LED accent for the daytime running light. It's got LED low and high beams, an LED turn signal that has this interesting fade in and fade out design, which is kind of similar to what BMW does. You can also see the Mazda 5-point grille has also been darkened on the Premium Sport. I like the way it looks, of course, with this Soul Red crystal metallic exterior color. The front camera system is standard on this trim. and the Mazda radar cruise control sensor is behind, of course, that logo. You can see it's got some well-integrated parking sensors, some functional and non-functional vents down here. And then you can see the lower front fascia has a new darked out chrome look as opposed to the bright chrome, which is something that I complained about in the CX-90 when I first drove it. It had too much chrome. This premium sport trim definitely addresses that. It takes some of the darker elements that we first saw on the CX-70, which is basically this car with its third row removed, and it gives this car a more sinister and sportier design. Now, moving around the side profile, this vehicle's exterior dimensions are deceiving because this is essentially the biggest vehicle that Mazda makes, and it is among the longest in the segment at 200.8 inches long, with a really long 122.8 inch wheelbase. It's around 7.5 inches longer in the wheelbase versus the old CX-9, but its overall length is only around an inch longer. It's also around an inch wider and around the same height. So this is pretty long by the class standards, but something like a Grand Highlander is still a couple inches longer than this vehicle. Now, looking at the wheels, these are the unique wheels on the premium sport trim. For the Turbo S, they're a 21-inch alloy wheel with a gloss black finish to them. It's got like a double 5-spoke design, riding on a 275 by 45 R21 Toyo Open Country all-season tire. The brakes are 13.7 inches all around, fully independent suspension, no adaptive dampers, but this vehicle offers around 8.1 inches of ground clearance with the big 21-inch wheels. I also noticed the wheel arch trim and the side skirt trim is also gloss black. I actually think it would have looked better if Mazda had done a full paint finish as opposed to the black. But I have to say the Soul Red Crystal looks pretty good on this vehicle. I apologize it's not sunny out, but we just dealt with kind of like a winter storm last night. Now, looking at the trim here, you can see it's also darked out. That inline 6 badge lets everybody know you have the inline 6. And as you can see, the mirrors are power folding with gloss black, integrated turn signals, full 360 camera, and there's also more gloss black along the roof rails, which is a low profile design. This trim also comes standard with their panoramic sunroof, which goes into the second row. Lets in a lot of natural light, which is nice. And then backing away from the vehicle, this is probably the CX-90's worst angle for me, but at the same time, it's still very much an attractive vehicle. The back end, to me, with its skinny taillights and its bulging rear hatch area at the top portion, just kind of looks like it has a big forehead. But you know, looks are always subjective, as you can see with all the new darkened trim, these full LED taillights, which also have an LED turn signal, which has that fade in and fade out, which is nice. The reverse light appears to be also an LED, and you also have blacked out badges here for the Mazda CX-90 logo, the all-wheel drive badge, and then there's also an eSkyActiv G badge to let everybody know this is the inline 6 that's electrified. One thing that would have been nice on the Turbo S models would have been if Mazda put like a exposed dual outlet exhaust. You can see the exhaust system is still a dual outlet, but it's kind of tucked underneath the rear bumper here. Actually, yes, it is tucked underneath the rear bumper. Again, an exposed system would have looked a lot better. This is an inline 6 engine, so some of you are probably curious to hear how it sounds, so let's go ahead and fire it up real quick. And sadly, even though this vehicle has an inline 6 like a BMW, it certainly doesn't have the same kind of noises that you'd hear from a BMW. Now, I also forgot to mention that rear wing, or that rear hatch here, has a very, very small integrated spoiler with its third brake light. I actually think Mazda should have made the spoiler a little bit larger and tucked the rear wiper underneath there to kind of clean up the look a little bit. But overall, it's still a very, modern design to it, and it's instantly recognizable as a Mazda. Now, looking at the cargo area, this is where the CX-90 trails its rivals because it is big on the outside, but sadly, Mazda hasn't always been great in terms of packaging. You can see my test car has the 3-person bench. You can also get a 2-person bench, which is standard on the full hybrid, plug-in hybrid versions, which kind of makes it confusing, but this model does seat up to 8 people. And with the 3-person bench, you get 14.9 cubic feet of storage space behind the third row. That's going to trail a lot of rivals by as much as 5 to 6 cubic feet of cargo space. So keep that in mind. If your plan is to carry 6 or 7 people regularly, you may not have room for all their stuff. There is a little bit of storage off to the side. As you can see, there's also a little bit of underfloor storage, but that spare tire underneath there takes up room. And you're going to find features like a 12-volt power outlet, some LED lighting back here. If you want to fold down the third row, Mazda makes it pretty simple. You pull on a strap right here. It's manual obviously, but that will fold down the third row to create around 40 cubic feet of storage space, which is usable, but something like the Grand Highlander offers around 17 more cubic feet of space. If you fold down the second row and the third row, Mazda says the maximum cargo capacity is 75 cubic feet of storage space, which is, again, pretty usable, but a lot of rivals offer between 10 to even 20 more cubic feet of storage space. So it is disappointing to see how big this vehicle is on the outside, but its interior space is a little bit average to slightly below average when you're looking at a lot of its mainstream rivals. Now moving on to the interior of the latest Mazda CX-90. Before we get inside, let me go ahead and show you guys the key fob. As you can see, this is Mazda's latest intelligent access key. It's definitely a much larger key versus their older smart access key system, but it is a relatively seamless looking key with the buttons on the side. You can see it's got your typical lock, unlock, power liftgate, and panic button. Unfortunately, there is no remote start from the fob itself. I'm not entirely sure if Mazda allows you to do that as well through the Mazda Connect smartphone app, since I've never had access to it. But as you can see, approaching the door handle, it's a traditional pull style. If you touch this area here, that will lock the doors with that signature beep. The mirrors are also power fold in. Mazda does offer an auto walkaway lock feature, which I don't have turned on at the moment, but when you want to unlock the door, just touch the back of the door handle and that will open up the door for you as long as you have the key fob on you. Now looking at the interior, you can see my test car with the Soul Red Crystal Metallic has the black leather interior. This is kind of a black with a contrast copper stitch to it. With some accent piping as well. These are not the premium Napa leather, but the leather feels pretty high quality. Mazda also offers a white leather with this color combination as well. But if you guys want like that beautiful brown leather, you have to step it up to the premium plus trim level, which also includes the upgraded Napa leather. These seats, thankfully, are still heated and ventilated. They adjust in 12 different ways. And you also get a two-person memory function for the driver's side. Sadly, Mazda doesn't offer like a massaging seat or anything like that, but the seats certainly make a great first impression. The interior in general does. Now looking at the door panels, you can see with the premium sport trim, as opposed to the wood from the premium plus, you get this kind of textured aluminum look plastic along with some silver painted plastic. This upper area is a soft touch injection molded plastic, more leather here and here. Chrome accented door handles. The window controls are one touch for all four, and they have a high quality feel to them. Down here you can see not the biggest door pocket storages, but it is hard touch plastic here. This trim also comes with the Mazda's Bose premium sound system, which sounds pretty good. If you guys are an audiophile, I highly recommend going for one of the top or higher trims to get that premium sound. Now stepping inside, you can see with around 8.1 inches of ground clearance, it has a nice easy step in height. As I shut the door, the door also has a pretty solid sounding thunk, which adds to that impression of quality. Remember, this is built on a new rear drive architecture. Now, starting the vehicle up, you can see I like the positioning of the start stop button. It doesn't really get blocked by the steering wheel as well. And as you can see, even though this is a mild hybrid, it actually has a traditional starter noise, which is weird because most vehicles that have basically a mild hybrid assist system, they kind of whir to life, but it's just strange. Mazda tends to do things a little differently. They kind of do it in the Mazda way, which is nice, but also weird. Now, the engine itself, it actually creates like an induction howl, and that's standard if you guys go for the Turbo S trims or if you guys go for the plug-in hybrids. It actually sounds better from the inside than it does from the outside, which is kind of interesting to see. But in terms of the rest of this cabin, it certainly makes a great first impression. Again, this trim also comes standard with a head-up display. You get the fully digital 12.3-inch driver display, which also can change the way it looks based on the drive modes here. You can see when you put it into its sport mode, it changes to a red color. And then if you turn on the adaptive cruise control, it gives you a kind of a driving display meter there, which looks nice. I actually think it's a really nice, fully digital cluster. Mazda did a pretty good job compared to some other competitors that also offer it. And then you can see with the upper trim, you get their 12.3-inch display. A 10.25 is standard if you guys go for the select trim, but the preferred trims and up have the bigger 12.3-inch display. As you can see, frustratingly, this is not a touchscreen, but it is a touchscreen when you have it connected to CarPlay. So this is their older system. You have to use this dial controller to kind of access information here. And I really do think it's time for Mazda to give us an all-new interface, which they have on the new CX-5, which I'll be driving in February of this year. So you'll have to be patient for that. It has a new 15-inch display that's a full tablet touchscreen. That to me is finally what the competitors or Mazda is finally giving their customers what they've been asking for. It's what competitors do. But the system, as you can see, for the most part will get the job done. It's just a little too far to use as a touchscreen because you're going to be using that dial for the most part. When I put the vehicle into reverse, you can see this trim also comes standard with a full 360 camera, which offers trajectory, it offers distance markers, and it has a pretty high quality resolution, which I appreciate. Especially when you compare it to some of the older Mazda systems with their older display. It certainly looks nice. It has built-in GPS standard. And then in terms of the materials, you can see you have a soft touch injection molded plastic. There's more of that leather material here on the dash, although it feels more like a leatherette. It's nice how you at least have the contrast stitch. You have silver painted plastic, of course, traditional manual air vents, and you have lots of buttons here for your dual zone or tri-zone climate control system with heated and ventilated seats. Along with, very high quality feeling buttons and switches. You can see this is for your wireless phone charging pad. It's weird because this phone charging pad actually seems a little shallow to me, but it does fit my iPhone 16 Pro Max nicely. It has a 12-volt power outlet here as well. It's not vented, however, so your phone tends to overheat on this charging pad. And for the most part, my phone worked when I was putting it on there. You can see more of that textured silver painted plastic trim here. As opposed to the real wood and some other trims. This shifter is certainly odd. You can see there's a trigger here at the front. To put it into dry or reverse, you basically click it over to the right, that's reverse, kick it down one notch to go to neutral, down all the way to go to drive, and then for park you have to go up to reverse and then over to the left while pushing the trigger. It can be a little finicky at first, but once you get used to it, it's fine. You can see you have a nice padded leather center console area. Open that up, it's a little on the shallow side. You have two USB-C charging ports in there, which is nice. The seats, for the most part, are comfortable and supportive. They hold you in place nicely. The padding could be a little softer, but the heat and ventilation function works pretty well. You have a glove box here, which is a dash, or it goes into the dash. It's huge. The lid itself is damped and lined with felt, offers additional storage here because there's not much in terms of storage here. And that's where some competitors offer like a storage shelf here, deeper storage here. The CX-90 only offers basically its cup holders and a little bit of storage here, but stuff's gonna kind of flail around. No additional storage here and a shallow center console. So kind of keep that in mind. Mazda could have done better with the ergonomics there. You can see the rearview mirror is an auto dimming, frameless, but no digital camera rearview mirror. Mazda doesn't offer that, sadly. You do have LED map lighting and some ambient lighting in here, but the Premium Plus adds extra ambient lighting, but you can't change the color, just the dimness. It's all white. You can see you've got sunglass holders here, a panoramic glass roof that does open up to vent air. We have this little button here. You can see it tilts open and it opens up just over the two front seats. And it looks like that's the largest that it opens. So it's not a very wide opening Pano sunroof, but it's nice how at least it opens up and it's there. But overall, the interior has pretty good build quality. The screen quality looks good. It's just the software that needs updates, but I didn't hear any squeaks and rattles. It has good visibility and sight lines, and it, for the most part, feels roomy up here, but it's really lacking in terms of interior storage, which is, again, an area where a lot of competitors have this car significantly beat. Now moving into the back seat of the new CX-90, as you can see, when you open up the back door, it actually opens up with a large opening, which is great if you need to fit a child seat back here because of the huge opening. This trim level also comes standard with a bench seat in the back. You can add captain's chairs for, I believe, like a $500 upcharge, which will lower the seating capacity to 7. This one, however, does seat 8 because the third row seats 3 across. I like the fact that Mazda offers a bench back here because not everybody technically wants the captain's chairs. These seats also do recline and they slide forward and back to give you more space in the third row. As you can see back here, the material quality is slightly padded soft touch material. You do have these retractable sunshades, which is a nice feature that parents look for. More of that aluminum look trim and this padded leather here. Window controls, as you guys can see, one touch up down, which is a nice touch. The window lock is on right now. You can see down here a little bit more storage and hard touch plastic materials, but as you can see, there's around 39.4 inches of legroom back here, which is certainly very usable, but some competitors do offer a couple more inches of legroom space. Now, as I shut the door here, you can see this is practically my driving position. This is with the seat all the way back, which there's a lever here to move the seat, and it's pretty comfortable for the most part. I can get back here, stretch my legs. I can cross my legs as well and get comfortable. There is a large hump here for the drive shaft, so the middle passenger has to straddle this, but you do have features like 3-level heated seats, and there's a button here for ventilated second row seats. That's only standard on the Turbo S Premium Plus. With the captain's chairs that are standard, you do have rear seat air vents, 2 USB-C charging ports, but no additional storage here other than you've got your 2 storage pockets there. You've got that armrest that folds down. Without it, you can see the seats themselves. The vehicle is wide enough to accommodate 3, But as you can see, you actually sit up a little bit higher here and it's not the most comfortable, so I wouldn't recommend putting somebody in the middle seat here for too long. Thankfully, there is a little thing here where you can recline this seat. You can see that's the most that you can recline it, which actually is a pretty decent amount. Now, this is with the seat fully reclined. If I go back to its upright position, here's the headroom space. I have a couple inches, still 3 inches maybe of headroom clearance. The sunroof does take up a little bit of that additional headroom space. So overall, the second row is certainly agreeable, but this is where I've seen some competitors offer like an additional 2 inches of legroom back here, which just makes it feel a little bit more spacious versus this car. Now let's go ahead and hop into the third row and talk about that space, because the CX-90 does unfortunately have one of the smaller third rows in the segment. So you can see, getting back here, you can either do 2 things. You could pull on this lever here, or you can also push this button here, which will automatically kind of push the seat forward, and you have to slide it manually out of the way. You can see this third row can seat 3 people across, but I don't think you'd want to do so. But let's go ahead and climb back here. The opening is not bad actually, because the seats do have a relatively big slide. But as I get back here, let's go ahead and crawl onto this side where I have this seat, second row seat, all the way slid back, which unfortunately, as you can see, oh, this is bad. I'd have to ask this second row passenger to move this seat up a little bit, but I can fit back here. My feet is basically just kind of jammed underneath this horrible second row. But Mazda says you have around 30 inches of legroom back here. 30 inches is around 3 to 4 inches less versus a lot of its rivals. So kind of keep that in mind. You do have features like these little vents back here. I guess these are your third row air vents. I don't know why they're so low. Mazda really should have put it in the ceiling. Some LED map lighting. You can see there's a USB-C charging port, a kind of a small window, hard touch plastic materials here. You do have the same USB-C here with cup holders, at least, along with that third row air vent, which basically just kind of vents air onto your knees. But I guess if you were going to sit back here, I would probably just sit back here like this and have somebody just sit in the middle seat. But as you can see, if you need to use the third row for actual adults, it's going to be a little tight back here. In terms of the headroom space, I do like how the headrests are full size, and at 5'7", my head's actually not hitting the ceiling too bad, so this is not as bad as I thought it would be. But in terms of the legroom space, this is where something like the Grand Highlander, the Palisade, the Telluride, even the Pilot and Pathfinder are going to offer way more space in the third row versus the CX-90. So it's been a little over a year since we had a new Mazda CX-90 for us to test for you guys. And I have to say, when this vehicle first came out, I was pretty impressed with the overall balance, the package. This is definitely still one of the most unique vehicles you're going to find in the mainstream 3-row mid-size family SUV segment. And the model that we're driving here is probably the more desirable model for me. It's the CX-90 with the turbocharged inline 6 that's electrified. This is the Turbo S model, so it means it has 340 horsepower hooked up to an 8-speed auto with the company's Skyactiv all-wheel drive system, of course, as standard equipment. To get the best 0 to 60 time, we'll go ahead and test that here in sport mode. We'll brake torque it. Which doesn't really enjoy being brake torqued, but on that run there, we got 0 to 60 in basically almost 6 seconds dead, 6.03 seconds. That's a little bit quicker than the last one that I tested, actually. I think I got 6.3 or 6.2 in one that was about 1.5 years ago. So that's a much better time. Now that time still trails a competitor like the Toyota Grand Highlander Hybrid Max with their turbo 2.4 electrified powertrain, but that's still very good performance. And I also have to say, this inline 6, while it doesn't have the same noises that I would associate with like a BMW, it does sound pretty unique. The engine itself is mostly smooth until you get the revs up above like 5,000 RPM. It's hooked up to an 8-speed auto that has its torque converter removed with a multi-plate clutch system, and it certainly feels a little bit more unique versus a typical transmission. But at the same time, I really appreciate how Mazda is being very different here. They're being unique. It has a slight whine from the engine when you're putting your foot down at higher RPM, 6.26 seconds there with slightly more uphill, but still, the engine refinement still is a little peculiar. I mean, it's not, if you guys are coming out of a BMW thinking this is gonna feel like a Japanese BMW, There are times where it does, but the engine whining sound and the slight vibration you feel above 5,000 is a little bit off-putting, but it's not horrible. I mean, especially if you're comparing it to like the 4-cylinder turbos and a lot of its rivals, this is a much more refined, upscale feeling powertrain. Now, the one thing that the CX-90 continues to offer is sporty handling. The steering in this vehicle is light, a little devoid of feel, but it's very quick. The suspension feels very buttoned down. This chassis also feels very stiff. The ride is on the firmer side, so no adaptive dampers on this car. It's got a fully independent suspension with around 8 inches of ground clearance, but it's a little, more toward firm, but it's not too, it's not a deal breaker for me. But if you prefer a softer ride on your family crossover, you're gonna wanna prefer maybe like a Toyota Grand Highlander, for example. Mid-range grunt is also strong, and the transmission appears to be more smooth and responsive than the one that I tested around 1.5 years ago. So I heard that Mazda was doing some tinkering with the software with the transmission, and I'm definitely noticing it's better in this car, in this particular one that I'm driving, a 2026 model year. So I appreciate how Mazda is making improvements there. I was in sport mode the whole time. It's got 3 different drive modes: sport, normal, and off-road. You're gonna drive it in normal mode most of the time, and it feels still pretty responsive. It doesn't feel lethargic or sluggish in normal mode, so I really appreciate that. Visibility out of the front and the side is also quite good. This A-pillar is a little on the thick side, and with the rear head restraints in place, they are blocking your rear view out of the back window, but sadly, no digital camera rearview mirror on this particular model. Remember, the Premium Sport is a new trim this year. It slots below, technically, the upscale Premium Plus trim, which doesn't have all the black accents of this car in general. But in terms of refinement, aside from the ride being a little firmer, it's still comfortable. You could easily take this vehicle on a long road trip, and the seats in this car, while the padding feels a little bit stiff, it's not bad. I was driving this vehicle on a longer 2-hour trip, and I was pretty comfortable. It had plenty of power, good visibility. It's an easy car to drive, and it puts a smile on my face. For a 3-row family SUV, this is definitely one of my favorite driving vehicles. And most vehicles in this class are not fun to drive, but Mazda, of course, with their reputation of driving matters, clearly they wanted to make driving enjoyment a priority with this vehicle. Unfortunately, it comes at the expense of comfort in terms of practicality. This vehicle is not quite as spacious as some competitors, even though it's bigger on the outside than most rivals. You've got, of course, their 12.3-inch infotainment system, which is a touchscreen in motion, which you can turn that on and off with the CarPlay and Android Auto. It looks good there. You've got an all-digital display. Technically, you have a smaller 10.25 in the lower trims. This vehicle does come with an auto start-stop tech feature. And I have to say, the start-stop in this car is constantly turning the engine off. I noticed that a lot if I was coasting, for example, my foot's off the accelerator and I was going like 40, 50, even 60 miles an hour. There were times where the engine would shut off because it is a mild hybrid. Remember, it has a small 0.33 kilowatt-hour battery pack, so it can do that. And it's doing it almost as much as like a full hybrid, which I found really interesting. Like, for example, right now, it says I stop in the tachometer. Right there, the engine's off. I'm still not touching the throttle, but it's still coasting along. And this is probably the reason why it's been able to get good gas mileage. It will seamlessly restart the engine up. So they've been working on the refinement of the start-stop in this powertrain. So I really appreciate that. In terms of my week's worth of driving, fuel economy wise, it's rated at 25 mpg combined. I got around 24 mpg combined in mixed driving. On the highway, I got it up to 31 mpg. So pretty good on the highway. Theoretically, you could do 400, just under 400 miles of range. I did around 370 in my week's worth of testing. Keep in mind, there also is a plug-in hybrid version of this car, but I personally like the inline 6. Unless you plan to plug the vehicle in all the time, I would go with the inline 6. It's probably, I think, the better, safer choice. It also has 340 horsepower. It's one of the most powerful engines you're going to find in the segment, which is nice. In terms of build quality, this vehicle is entirely built in Japan, and it feels solid. Not a single squeak and rattle. Material quality is average to slightly above average. I don't love this black interior. I much prefer the Premium Plus trim with its lighter tones, with its wood tones. This to me has like a more sinister, darker, like sportier vibe to it, which is nice, but I would have personally gone with the white interior with this Soul Red Crystal, which, by the way, the Soul Red Crystal on the CX-90, it looks good on this car. So I just don't know if I love the black fender line, or the fender trim, and the black lower side skirt trim. I would have preferred it to have the all paint finish, the full paint finish, but hey, it still looks better versus all the chrome that they had on the 2024 model, which when they didn't offer the black option, it's definitely nice how Mazda's kind of listening to feedback. So overall, I still really like the CX-90. It's one of my favorites if you really value driving dynamics. You want something that feels sportier with its rear drive architecture, with its inline 6 that is a little rough around the edges still, but it's got a much better transmission. as long as you don't need maximum amounts of interior flexibility, space, and ergonomic storage, the CX-90 certainly is going to suffice for a lot of people, and that's precisely why it's been doing well. I've been seeing these new CX-90s everywhere, and I can see why. It's a great, stylish, premium alternative to a lot of its mainstream rivals, especially if you don't need, the maximum amount of interior space. Now, with just under 55,000 units sold in America last year, the CX-90 has actually been enjoying some pretty strong sales for Mazda. In fact, sales were up around 77% in the US in 2024 versus 2023. And I suspect for 2025, when Mazda finishes off the remaining calendar year, they're probably going to do around 55 to maybe even nearly 60,000 units. So this vehicle has been a huge success for Mazda, outselling something like the old CX-9 by nearly 2 to 1. And after spending a full week with the latest premium sport trim level, it's pretty easy to see why a lot of people are flocking to this vehicle. If you don't necessarily need the most interior space in the segment, you're going to want to put this vehicle at the top of your list. As you guys saw, that inline-6 engine delivers a unique driving experience, plenty of power down low, but also a relatively refined driving experience. The transmission upgrades that they made this year to the software have improved the shift logic and shift smoothness, which results in a better driving experience. I'm still not in love with some of the coarse and grainy sounds the inline-6 engine makes. I'm hoping Mazda will continue to make improvements there in terms of the sound quality, but again, you can get around that by just using or choosing the plug-in hybrid variant, which I've had a chance to test as well a couple of years ago. The ride and handling also make this one of the sportiest vehicles in the segment to drive, which is great if you're a driving enthusiast like myself. It's a 3-row family SUV that isn't boring to drive, while at the same time its ride quality is firmer. It doesn't beat you up too much, but if you choose a model with the smaller wheel and tire package, you're going to get an even softer ride still. The interior also has, a relatively open and airy feel, but at the same time, the second and the third row is going to be compromised a little bit, but at least the front seats are comfortable and supportive. You could get more storage options in some of its competitors in terms of the ergonomics. But, if you get past all that, the CX-90 still has a very comfortable road trip ready cabin with most of the tech that you could want. Although I do think it's time for Mazda to give us an all new software, which we're technically getting in the new CX-5, which I'll be driving in the early part of next year, which I'm really looking forward to doing so. Or I guess by the time this video posts, it'll be later this year. The styling of this vehicle still has some odd angles from, different proportions, but I think for the most part it works. I especially love the premium sport trim with all of the black accents, which kind of takes it to the same, degree of what the CX-70 looks like, which is basically this vehicle minus the third row. Now, if you're interested in getting your hands on the new CX-90, this is where Mazda has also kept the pricing pretty competitive at a base price of around $38,800 for the base select trim. It's actually a little bit less expensive by a few $1,000s versus most of its rivals. Most of you are probably going to step it up to the preferred trim for the low $40,000 range. And then, of course, if you want to step it up to this premium sport trim, it's going to cost you at least $47,000. That's on the base turbo with 280 horsepower. If you want the S version with the extra 60 horsepower, Mazda charges around $7,000 more. So you're looking at around $54,000 for the Turbo S in the premium sport trim level. Going up to the Premium Plus, we'll get you the captain's chairs and ventilated second row seats and premium Napa leather. That's going to come in at just around $60,000. But as tested, this model here with the Soul Red Crystal upcharge and the $1,500 destination, you're looking at an as tested price of around $56,000. Literally just over 56 grand makes this vehicle about the same price as a fully loaded version of like a Kia Telluride, a Hyundai Palisade, for example, or a Honda Pilot. A Toyota Grand Highlander Hybrid Max is going to be a little bit more expensive. Same thing with some of its other rivals like the Hyundai Palisade Hybrid, which can also cost around $60,000, but you can option this vehicle up to around $60,000 as well. So it's kind of nice how Mazda again throws in a lot of the upscale premium touches that will remind you more of like a Lexus, a BMW, or an Acura, but at the same time they're still charging mainstream money, which is probably why a lot of people are flocking to this vehicle. So again, the changes that Mazda has made have definitely kept this vehicle fresh, and as long as you don't need maximum interior space, I highly recommend still putting this one near the top of your list. But with all that said, hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on the brand new 2026 Mazda CX-90 in this new premium sport trim. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.